Hello and welcome back to Rewritten, a podcast for working moms who want to have a conversation about can we actually have it all. So I'm here, I'm Jess Wass, your co-host. I'm here with my other co-host.
Teresa Sweeney, the senior executive in finance and an author.
Yeah, and we're excited to be in conversation today. So Teresa, how are you doing today?
You know what? This has been a little bit of a funny week. We are just a couple weeks into summer camp for our kids, and it is in the middle of New York of the incessant smoke coming down from the Canadian wildfires. I keep saying wildflowers instead of wildfires.
I wish it was wildflowers, it would smell better.
That sounds so much nicer. But otherwise it's been good. I feel like we're settling into a camp rhythm, which has been nice, and kind of enjoying like a little bit of the lull heading into the end of summer. What about for you?
Complete opposite. Chaos over here. It's like 9:15 in the morning as we record this, and I feel like I've already lived like four lives. But like normally I work from home, so I don't have to leave the house other than for daycare pickup, which is great. So, everyone else gets ready and then I get to the shower probably at like 9 a.m. But today I was like, I have things to do. I am going to meet people today. I have to be in person. I'm hoping to run into you, Teresa, later. Like we're trying to meet in person later. One of the like 15 plans that I made. And I wake up early this morning. I'm like, I'm going to be ahead of schedule. I'll drop my kid early at daycare. I go to get in the shower at 7:15. There's no hot water in the building.
Stop. That's horrible.
I was like, are you kidding me? And my partner's like, just take a cold shower. And I was like, just go, I'm not taking a cold plunge.
Not here for that.
I like a very hot shower. And so
Even
I
in
basically
the
had to take
summer?
I had to take a horse bath this morning because I
Okay,
just
my
couldn't.
husband makes fun of me because I actually love a frigid shower only in the summer, but then like in the winter, yeah. I
No, I'm
wanted
still
to be
taking
whatever.
hot showers in the summer and then coming out sweating and being like, blast the AC. I'm so hot.
Cold showers. Cold is great
Can't do it. I
when it's
can't do
hot.
it, man. So this is where you find me this morning. But we've been talking about we've been wanting to do an episode, and we'll do one in maybe next episode or the one after about like what you do when chaos erupts, because that's I think parenthood in a nutshell, which is have a plan. What they say, you make plans and God laughs. If you're into
Yes.
God, that's what it feels like. So
Yep, super fair. I had one of those 2 weeks ago, so we'll get to talk about them all in that episode in a couple.
yes, but today we wanted to focus on a little bit different topic. We wanted to really talk about how to accelerate your career, what gets in the way of us being promoted, because part of the show we're targeting working women on purpose, because it's really important to us to have careers and to be ambitious in those careers. But we often get into a situation where we feel like stuck and we feel like maybe the way that we want. And so we thought we'd peel back the layers a little bit on that today and talk about what gets in the way. Anything else you want to tee up in terms of conversation, Dee?
No, I think that's perfect. And, I think it's one of those that's so important and resonant. And by the way, that I think becomes especially topical as we become mothers and like in especially that early parenting journey when it's just so much of our world is completely rocked by having kids. And I feel like I talk to women a lot. And I certainly felt this as this moment of becoming a mom of like, what does this mean for my career? And do I want to pull back? How much? Am I sort of taking a break? How do I think about this? And then especially when you're sort of back into whatever your new normal is, like how do you think about progression in that world? And then I do think there's so much interesting research. And I know we're going to talk about a lot of personal experiences around getting promoted and then like really finding effective sponsors in our own career journeys. And it's something that unfortunately there's just a lot of kind of mildly depressing research out there
Yes.
about, and I think is also really brought to life in our own experiences. So I'm excited to chat through that.
Yeah, so let's actually start with the macro sense, because we're going to get into and talk about and give you some actionable advice and things that we've done in our career to help promote our careers and to move forward. But let's also just acknowledge the elephant in the room, that there's a lot of macro factors and systemic issues that actually do make it harder for us as women to succeed in the workplace, and especially the extra tax that once we become mothers. So I thought maybe we would just start there and acknowledge some of those factors, because I don't ever want us to be misinterpreted as saying, being Sheryl Sandberg 2.0 and just be like, just lean in and ignoring everything else as if it's only an individual problem. And listen, I still think that lean in advice was great advice. I just think people are, being hard on her because she didn't acknowledge that there's other factors beyond that. So let's maybe start there and talk about what some of those are, and then we can get into the individual. So One thing that I have done for years, but has been quieter now because of the era that we're in 2026, is, I do a lot of work in DEI. And part of that is, yes, talking about people of color. Part of that is talking about people who are neurodivergent. And part of that is talking about women and what is different for us in the workplace. And one of my signature workshops has always been about unconscious bias. And so I have a lot of research that I've done about what holds women back in the workplace. And the real answer is there is actual gender bias in the workplace. And I think it's important just to be aware of it. And we could talk about some of those. But have you felt or seen gender bias pop up in the workplace, Teresa, across your career?
Yeah. Yes.
It's almost did a spit take. Yeah. She's like, yeah, I'm alive.
A couple of things that I feel like I've experienced most pointedly. One is especially the double standard around women of like, as it relates to promotions, as it relates to raises, compensation in general, the damned if you do, damned if you don't factor of like, if you don't speak up, then there's often like it's easier to get overlooked. People don't think you want it. They put on assumptions around like, well, she's a mom. She probably doesn't want this stretch role where she's going to travel or have all these extra burdens. Like, better not, don't want to overwhelm her with that. But if you do, it's like, oof, too ambitious. And like, really, whatever. It's this sense that like, you're not likable and you're this concept of overly ambitious. I had this like show up in a big way actually in a role where I had been kind of like recently recognized, let's say, and I went to somebody senior on the team and I was like, look, I'm so grateful to have gotten this. I am super excited to be here, totally aligned with where we're going. I want to help in every way I possibly can to help kind of realize this vision that you've laid out for the team. Like, what do you need to see from me? What's important for me to get to the next level? And unfortunately, the reaction to that was kind of like, how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
How dare you?
How dare you try and help me?
Yeah, we just recognized you. How dare you ask what it means to get to the next level after you have just been acknowledged? I candidly was horrified.
Sure.
But like as a manager, as a leader, if somebody came and said that to me, I'd be like, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love this, especially if this somebody was someone who I considered a strong performer with a lot of runway. Very shocking. Totally. Yeah. Very disheartening.
And you can't imagine sometimes that your male counterparts, right? There's an overly ambitious woman, and it's very easy to get there. Anytime a woman is expressing, I'd like. And we actually call this concept, it's called stereotype backlash. So it's when you act in a way that's counter to stereotypes. So the stereotype about a woman is, right, more reserved, more submissive. That is the stereotype. I'm not saying we are that way. That is the stereotype. So then when you are more assertive, you get dinged for it. And then when we talk about intersectionality, you're a woman who shows up with a color on you, it becomes even more aggressive, right? So that's really what's going on is the stereotype backlash. By the way, Asian employees also face a lot of stereotype backlash in the very same way that women do. So you can be too aggressive for speaking up, but at the same time, to your point, if you don't ask for something, then people will make assumptions as well. I always totally. I have a signature line in one of my workshops on managing up, and I say, no, your work does not speak for itself. You speak for your work, because it's really important that if you have ambitions, that you have to seed them with someone, because otherwise people will make up stories about you, and those stories will never be as good as a story that you can tell about yourself.
Yeah, and this is something I feel like I talk about with so many, especially female colleagues, of especially again that same double standard with respect to self-promotion of like, how do you talk about yourself and your work in a way that builds that awareness? Because I think you're exactly right. People need to know. Like at a certain point, like a lot of people don't have visibility on what you're doing, and so if you never talk about it, it's impossible for anybody to recognize that. Like it's really relying on so many outside factors and so much just happening to fall in your favor, and or your manager effectively advocating for you. It puts so much in everybody else's hands and gives you effectively zero agency for your own contributions. I've talked about this with so many senior women. The number who have felt some form of backlash for how they did this, it's basically 100%, it almost feels like you have to do it because if you don't, it doesn't work. And everyone I know who's gotten to a certain level of seniority does do it. But all of us have also experienced the downside of it, which is that people think you're self-promotive or whatever, that there's like something there that is frustrating.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was in a coaching call the other day, and a client, we were talking about ambition because that's why this person hired me because they have ambitions and they want to figure out how to get to the next level. But she said something at some point. She was like, "Well, I don't want people to think that I'm ambitious, or like I just really like having an impact. That's why I want to move up, but it's not because I'm ambitious." And I said, "Hold
That
on
is
one
quite
second."
literally.
I said, why does it sound like ambition is this like dirty word? Right? Like, why are you rejecting this idea of being ambitious? And she's like, "Oh, I just don't want people to think I'm just climbing just to climb." And I said, okay, so you don't want to be misunderstood in your intentions and why you want to move up and why you're passionate about the work. And you want that story to be clear. But let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious. What you've internalized is exactly that, right? The stereotype backlash, which is like, well, I can't say that I'm ambitious, and being ambitious for a woman is a bad thing. And I think where we want to push through the point of your story is be ambitious. Recognize there may be a little bit of backlash, but there's nothing wrong with being ambitious, especially when you love the work, you love helping, you love the impact that you're making. And that's really what drives for a lot of women.
And wonder if what people conflate is this idea that ambition always means power hungry,
Mm-hmm.
like self-absorbed, super egotistical. And the answer is like of course not. Like there's or money, by the way, being like the primary motivator. I think it's one where there are just so many flavors of, and I do and like everybody's going to have different values ultimately that they're solving for. But like for me, like I resonate a lot with what your client had said. Like for me, it's so much about what I love is the ability to have an impact and to get to drive, to get to lead and really contribute to the making of something better. For me, that's 100% what lights me up. Like
Yeah.
at a certain point, like the rest, I mean, the
You
rest
take it
doesn't
or leave it.
matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's also be clear, where do you have the most impact? And where can you have the biggest
Yeah.
impression on developing others? It's as you move up, right? You have
100%.
more impact and control, but not control because I want to be a puppeteer. Control meaning like I get to make the decisions and I get
Yes.
to be heard and my voice is mattered. And that's why a lot of people aren't happy in their jobs when they get stuck in the middle because it's a lot of work, but they do all this work and then it's got to wait for people 3 levels up to do anything with it. And that's very disheartening because you're missing the link between my work and my impact. And
100%.
yeah, I
And I
think that's
think
what
that
drives a lot of people.
yeah, definitely. And I think that like stuck in the middle piece is so important, especially for working moms, because I do think a lot of us run into these moments of like stepping into more senior types of roles at the same time when we're making choices or not about like do we want to have kids and how does that impact our relationship, even with our partners and obviously how we show up as parents. And I'd be interested, I mean, at a fundamental level, even like what you think about how like that point in time lands for women and how that has an impact on how we move up in our organizations.
So there's a lot of good data on this. I don't have it all at my fingertips, but when this is a good guest that we can bring on later. I have a couple of mine who have a lot of great information on this. But what's often talked about is that when women have kids, their earning power goes down, and when men have kids, their earning power goes up. So let's be honest, it hurts your career as a woman to have children. Both men and women have been having children later and later, and I think it's because our generation has wanted to establish our careers more before entering into that. But what that means is, as we move closer to 30s, when you're having children, you're now at this point where you're not entry level anymore, where you're about to take on manager roles, or you just became a manager, or you're in this middle and you're trying to get to the top, but now you're going to get stuck because you have children. Women are going to see the brunt of that, and it's going to affect you. And then let's just say you get past that period. Because we're having kids later, the next point that's going to be challenging is periomenopause and menopause.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm just learning more about this now, and I barely scratched the surface, but I'm super intrigued and also horrified at the same time. But what I learned from watching Real Housewives of Rhode Island is that Rhode Island is the first state to have made menopausal woman a protected class. Because at that point, again, it's another point in your career where maybe now you're moving towards the senior level, or you're starting to hold senior power, where all these changes happen with you that can affect your mental state, that can affect your physical state, that make it harder to show up. And so there's a lot of factors that make it really difficult for us as women to succeed. And we haven't even talked about, talking about structural factors. There's also a lot that affects when it comes to evaluating performance. So
Yeah.
beyond even, okay, I'm ambitious, people know that I want to move up. Now, when people are evaluating for performance, there's still a lot of gender bias that shows up at that point. So women are often evaluated that they have to perform in order to get the promotion, okay? Whereas men are promoted based on potential. So it's a catch-22 because, Teresa, you want the promotion. Well, I need to see that you do the job before I can give you the promotion, but you won't give me the job until I'm promoted. Do you see like where the problem is? Whereas like, if I'm, Jermaine, all of a sudden it's, oh, Jermaine's got potential. So, I think he could do it. Let's just give him the promotion and see what happens.
And see what happens.
And that's what works against us. Women also have faced greater penalty for errors. So when you do make a mistake, women are punished more for those mistakes, which now also makes sense why all my women clients are perfectionists. Women are more likely to lose credit to a male colleague. They see this a lot in academia. When women publish with men, they're less likely to receive tenure than the men on those papers. And then there's performance bias. Have you ever gotten a performance review that says, hey, maybe you should smile more, or, maybe you should be a little friendlier, or, maybe you need to be less harsh in the way that you present things, as opposed to you're not strategic enough in your thinking. I'd rather get something like that.
Also, don't forget the also omnipresent, you're a little emotional.
Oh, yes. Well, it's funny. I've had the opposite in my career, because as a Black woman, I've just never felt like anger or really emotion in general has been accessible to me. And so there's a lot that I've repressed down. I'm also not one to cry. And this is something I've thought about, but maybe never said out loud. I feel like as a woman, when you're not emotional, when you don't cry, you actually lose out on a lot. So people give a lot of attention to women when they express tears. You get a lot of support. People assume that you're upset. And when you don't cry, people just assume as a woman you're not upset.
Actually, yeah, that's a very interesting read on it also. It's funny because it was interesting. I mean, I feel like there's some dynamic that happens, whereas I've observed, by the way, also absolutely true in myself, of like more of an inclination early in career to get kind of emotional about, especially in response to feedback. I've experienced it a few times as a manager. I definitely did it probably like 2 or 3 times, like early in my career. But now I think it's interesting because the more senior I've gotten, the more like, I had a really funny conversation with a friend about this one time, of like, it's so funny because like sometimes there is a tendency for the men to get like madder about stuff than the women get. And like, I feel like the women are off, like, especially becoming moms, you almost build like a little bit more emotional resilience, I think, in a lot of ways as a parent, because of all the things that you manage all the time.
Yeah, and what you're getting at is men are allowed to be angry.
Totally.
And it's nobody bats an eye. It's just normal. Men are allowed to get mad, hit their fists on the table, yell. If a woman does that, people go, you have lost your mind, woman.
Totally. It would, like, I mean, even the thought of it is so absurd. I've never observed it. I have not observed that in the wild ever.
Can you imagine?
Ever.
Can you imagine if I yelled in the workplace? It would be insane. I had a professor who I love when I was getting my master's, and we were talking about this anger thing. He's like, maybe you should just yell and get angry sometimes. And I said, Bill, with all due respect, you are a white man. I'm a Black one. I cannot yell and get angry in the workplace, Bill. I can't.
I don't know
I understand where that's
well.
coming from. I think you're maybe you just need to and then release it. But I just don't think that's accessible to me. I don't think it's going to read the way it is.
Yeah.
It's just.
No, I totally agree. I mean, and also, by the way, it is also not behavior I want to exhibit. It's like there's an element of it, which is it feels like it's a sort of loss of any type of emotional regulation. And there's probably many more effective ways to communicate whatever it is that you're trying to communicate in that moment. It's obviously totally reasonable to feel frustrated at any given time. I mean, obviously there's always going to be things that drive us some form
Yeah,
of
but
family or
it's a
another.
loss of control, right? Like,
It is, yeah.
and I remember when I was at Starwood Hotels, Starwood had one of the best cultures I've ever seen in a company. But there was one time, and it was, I still think about this relationship because it was a relationship with like a VP who I was like very close with. I developed a relationship with them. They were on a different team, but they sort of took me under their wing. And then something shifted in him. I still think maybe there was something going on at home because I really could not understand how they had like a Jekyll and Hyde moment. We were on a call one day and they started yelling. I don't know if it was at me or at someone else. And I got off that call and I was like, I need to call, like, I'm going to call like HR. Like, this is so unacceptable because people did not yell at Starwood. That was like
Yeah.
not an acceptable thing. And then I went up to my next startup and there was just screaming, yelling all the time. And it riled me up. I lied. I yelled back one day, but it was after a racist comment was made and I just lost my mind and started screaming back. And I just was not going to take it lying down. But when you're in an environment where yelling, like it becomes like the norm. But I still think it's seen differently and looks differently on a woman than it does a man. And so
Yeah.
emotions in the workplace, it's another, like you said, Teresa, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because I think if you get emotional, then people are apt to be like, I was once called in because somebody, the CEO who was a woman was like, so-and-so cries all the time. You need to tell her she can't cry in the workplace. She's crying too much. And I would just go and listen to her. I was like, she's upset. She's overwhelmed because the CEO is a lunatic. And I understand. But you're damned if you cry, and the hill I will die on as well as a woman, you're also damned if you don't get emotional. Because people just assume that everything's okay and that whatever they're doing is fine, and nobody wants to support you because they're like, well, she seems okay. But the tears, we go to the person who's crying, and we assume the person who's not crying is then the aggressor.
Yeah. Yeah. Super, super fair. So what, like recognizing, I feel like there are so many reasons to not feel good about all of the structural things that are in our way. Like what works? Like what have you seen in terms of actually getting promoted, finding sponsors that helps?
So, yes, let's acknowledge all the things stacked against us. But our point is not to give up. Our point is also that if you don't get promoted, it's not necessarily because of gender bias. You need to make sure that you're actually operating in the way that you think that you are. And so one of the frameworks that I built for my clients in terms of how to level up your career, I call it, if you want to level up, all you have to do is remember to duck. And so duck stands for discover, update, clarify, and keep it going. So these are, to me, the four elements that I think you need to master if you want to level up your career. The discover is all about understanding your key stakeholders and how they difference in terms of communication and preferences. Because a lot of times we're so focused on, our own narrative and story that we're not actually bridging the gap communication-wise between the different stakeholders. We're presenting the same way to everyone, and that will not help you move up. You have to recognize that different people need to be talked about in different ways.
Oh my God, that resonates so much because I feel like I have had like one long-standing practice that I love, which is around like sending basically kind of a weekly update email to my boss around like the major initiatives I have underway, what I got done in the last week, like the major updates, and then what I'm going to get done for next week. I love it because it's a really effective mechanism to keep myself accountable.
Yes.
I actually I've written it even in between spaces of like, even if I'm switching roles or time off in between jobs, like as I get ready to start the new one, it's become such a nice way to keep myself organized around what I'm driving. But what I've also realized is like different types of managers have totally different preferences for like the amount of detail, how much they want to be in the flow. And so even figuring out how to like having a conversation with them, 100% of like what they want to be in the loop on, and effectively like just getting that understanding, that kind of gut intuition for like how much detail they want and on what type of cadence and what they want to like what they really want to be aware of.
They care about.
100%. Yeah. And what are the questions that they're going to ask? And like, what do they really want to make sure that you've covered? Makes a big difference.
100%. And what you just said is like a master class, really, and the execution of that, because that to me is the discover piece mixed with the update, where it's all about the 3 P's of proactive communication. What you're doing right there and why it's effective is you're not waiting for a manager to be like, Teresa, what are you working on? And this is really, really important, especially in remote environments where managers can't look over your shoulder or see that you're sitting at your desk. And in that absence of communication, people's minds go to the worst. So especially if you're working on a project that doesn't have like quick outputs all the time, your manager's sitting there and doesn't see anything coming from you. And so their mind goes to the worst. You're sitting at home playing video games all day, or you're not even at your desk. Seriously, this is what people will think
Definitely.
if you don't give them something else. And so that is why what you're talking about is so effective, because before they ask, so hey, how's it going? You're saying, by the way, here are the things I have in flight. Here's what they are. The first thing that manager is thinking is, oh, she's on top of it. Right? So when I don't hear from her, I don't need to worry because she's still pushing things forward, even if I don't ask about it. That's number one. I think number two is you're also being clear on like what's on your plate so that you can have a conversation about prioritization. So that when they come to you with one more thing, you'd be like, well, remember, I'm working on these 16 other things that have been in my emails for the last couple of weeks. Would you say this new whim is more or less important than the 15 other whims that you've had? Like, which do you want me to do first? That helps you manage your workload as well. And then your point about, hey, even if I do the same format, different managers like different levels of detail. I may start with this one first with this manager because they care about this project the most.
Yeah.
It's understanding what makes your manager tick so that you can speak their language. Otherwise, you find this frustration where like you feel like you're being micromanaged by a boss, or you feel like you're like talking to a wall, like you just can't get anywhere. It's because you're not understanding their language.
Spot on. Because, and especially that update piece. I mean, now I've gotten to be on sort of the receiving end of it and experience this in a client service context where we had like literally clients that my team was working for. And I feel like literally the worst thing that can happen in any one of those contexts is exactly what you just said, where your sort of stakeholder, if you will, whether it's your manager, your client, is sitting there wondering like, where is this? You know, it's that when they have that worry, exactly as you said, there's so much space to fill in the what is he or she doing? Is this actually moving? Is this under control? Do they even care? And that I think like really, really can damage reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really the ability to find like whatever it is, whether it's something like a weekly update email or you have some other cadence that you work on with your manager.
Your one-on-one. Yeah, your one-on-ones.
100%. One-on-ones is great. And coming in with an agenda of like, these are the major things that I want to talk through today. All of that just really demonstrates this solid command of like, you are in control. You are in the driver's seat. You've got your stuff. And, you know, and every once in a while, it's like maybe your manager helps you adjust the wheel a little bit.
That's
but
fine,
like,
but they don't mind doing that. But why this is so important is because if we want to move up, as you move up, there's less and less direction and more of you driving. And if you can't showcase that I know how to drive, if you constantly show like I need to be told what to do, I need to be checked on, they can't trust that I can just take something and run with it, you're not positioning yourself to be someone who's promoted. And we won't always get access as well. I remember when I finally got to, director level at Starwood, I was chief of staff to the CMO for a hospitality company. He was on the road all the time. We would have one-on-ones set up every week, but they got canceled at least once a week because he's traveling. And so I literally had 30 minutes with this man every 2 weeks to talk about anything that I needed. And so I had to be really, really thoughtful about what am I saying in that one-on-one? Also, how am I structuring it? Because if I get stuck on one topic and I have 4 more questions to ask, but I can't move forward with a project until I get more direction, now I've been sitting on a project for a month before I can move it. That's going to hurt me in the end because they're going to be like, what's taking you so long with this project? So it's really understanding as you move up, you're getting less and less face time with that boss. You need to show that you're on top of things and moving things forward. And people actually, I think a lot of times prefer to have something to react to, even if it's like, no, don't do that, do this. Great. All I need is the direction, right? Versus you being like, I don't know, what do you think?
But that is also another really important nuance because there's something so different. Like I've found as a manager, there are a few things as emotionally exhausting as somebody presenting me a very complicated situation and then like, just let me know what you think or what you want me to do. It's like,
where do I even start? Like,
oh my God.
What can you, and so what you're saying is start with your perspective.
Yes. Totally.
And also be clear, what do you want from me? Do you know what you want to do, but you just want like me to, sanity check it?
Yes.
Or are you stuck? Stuck where? What is the question? Right.
Yes.
And I used to tell my team, because I'm very much like get to the point first. And so I would say inverse. You're starting with the details and give me a report of the details. And then I'm like I'm so impatient sometimes. And then I'm sitting there being like, okay, like, but what do you want? right? Because I trusted my team. So I was like, I don't need you to give me an update for like 5 minutes. And then at the end be like, is this cool? Like, if you could start with, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Is that cool? Unless there's something in there that I'm like, hey, I need a little bit more detail or I'm unclear, I'd rather just be like, yeah, go. And now it's a 30-second conversation instead of a 5-minute conversation because I'm so pressed for time.
Totally. And that ability to actually really distill down, like, and think through, like, because I think it is a couplefold. One is, what do they need to know as my manager?
Yes.
But two is also, like, really clearly, like, what do I need from them? Like, what is actually important here?
What's the question here?
Yeah, and I love, I mean, I both, like, I try to do this always when I send something up the chain, and I find myself giving this feedback a lot for people who I work with, of like, always come with this perspective on, like, what do you like, a little bit on the situation as needed, but like, what do you think the answer is? And if you need input from me, like, what does that look like? And most of the time, like, I feel like, especially once I've gotten in a good rhythm with somebody, usually it's like, sounds good, take it and run. And if it's stickier, it's like, all right, like, let's, maybe we have a conversation or unpack this, or let's make sure we go get this piece of information that's needed to do that better. But then you can be so much more surgical around actually getting to, like, what are the fundamental questions behind this decision and what do we really need to be comfortable about, so that we make the best possible choice in this situation.
Absolutely. And so when I think about, okay, we've given this advice on how to take a little bit more control over your career, but I'm thinking about the context of like, okay, but now we're working moms. And so when you become a mom and you have these small children or teenage children or, about to graduate college children in the background as you're trying to navigate this, where does it get harder or trickier once you bring the kids into the equation?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And I mean, personally, I feel like the squeeze on this is sometimes I think it's easy to look at stuff like this and be like, whatever, this is nice to have, not must do. I'm just going to wait on it.
Time.
And then I didn't do it this week, and then next week doesn't look good either. And then it's like, all of a sudden it's just been like a month or 5 since you've done anything like this. And it goes into even as simple as prepping for a meeting with your manager or skip level or whatever it is. And I think that's the tough part. Is it, if you think about like 2x2 matrix of urgent and important, it's kind of like not urgent, but really important.
And then Eisenhower says you have to schedule it. You have to block out that time or it doesn't get done.
I think that's exactly right. Because it's like, it's actually making dedicated space for it. It's really important. I was interesting. I was having a conversation with another like female colleague about this also, where sometimes like so much urgent, not important stuff gets like dumped on your plate as a manager. And I also feel like there's a bias to put more of like the team or emotional things on the female leader in a group. Because there's this like, oh, she can handle it, or she's good at that. And I have 100% experienced this. I've seen a lot of other women experience this. And the trap is like, it almost becomes like quicksand. Like you really just get pulled into this like never ending vicious cycle of like little stuff that is not recognized, not rewarded,
and keeps you from doing the strategic work.
Totally.
I just had a coaching client in conversation where we were working on this exact thing, and she just came back into the session because that's what she was supposed to work on, recognizing that she was the fixer, right? When there's a problem, everyone threw that to her, but she didn't. But she was overwhelmed with all this fixer stuff that it was stopping her from moving up and be doing the more strategic work that has a higher impact, and that's what she needs to demonstrate to get to the next level. So she came back into the coaching session and said, I was at a meeting. They tried to dump this presentation on me, but it's really for this other team. But normally I would just take it because it needs to get done. And I said, okay, how about you take it? Because I'm actually at capacity at the moment, and then I'm happy to review and edit. And she said, they looked at me like, because they weren't used to it. And in another meeting where she did this, someone said, are you okay? Like they actually... Okay. But my client, she did not waver. She just said, yeah, I'm okay. I'm just being direct about, what I see in the challenges here. And then guess what? The people just took it and did it. And she didn't get it on her plate.
Love that.
And now she's going to focus this time. Then a project team that was urgent from a SVP that she was able to tackle. And then she did something that made me extra proud. She said, and then afterwards, because I had like this new energy from not being bogged down with all the bullshit stuff, she said, afterwards, I then sent an email touting what I had done and showcasing what I'd done so I would get the credit for it. Normally something I never do, right? I would just like send a DM to my boss being like, I did it. And I was like, this is exactly what we're talking about, right? It's making sure that you have those boundaries and you don't get stuck being the fixer, getting the dump of everyone's work. And to do that, you have to be able to deliver at that high level when you can. But also I said to her, I said, you do so much, you've earned so many trust chips. Ask yourself, have you actually demonstrated over and over and over that you're someone to trust? Have you accumulated, think about like all these poker chips. Each one represents a trust building moment because you delivered something, someone counted on you for something, someone said something good about you. A lot of women are hoarding these chips. Okay? They're hoarding
For a
it.
rainy day. It's like maybe some.
They just didn't, they never thought like, they forgot it's currency that they could spend. And so my client said, I've just spent all these trust chips, but then I earned a new trust chip back by being able to do this higher level work. And so I'm not going to go bankrupt anytime soon.
Love that, because the other related concept here is like it's so uncomfortable. I think we talked about it in one of our other episodes too, but like whatever you say yes to is what you're going to get more and more and more of. And I think we have such a bias to say yes as some form of people pleasing of like, yes, I can do that, and we don't want to let people down. And I and it becomes this like, if we just say yes to all kind of the crappy work, that is going to be what totally fills our whole week, like our whole bucket. And so I think it's partly and I really love what you just said, because I think there is also this element of it feels horribly, horribly, painfully uncomfortable the first time you do it. And it is so important in that moment to just let it sit, stand your ground, and just let somebody else pick up that thing that you don't want to touch.
100%.
And like the second time's a million times easier. The third time's like another million times easier.
And then before you know it, you don't even think about it.
And by the way, people stop asking. It's like
eventually, they
there's
do.
Like a certain point where it's like she's not going to
retaught people. Yeah. Or not even like she doesn't do that, but like no, we need her for this work. Don't bother
other stuff that's much more important. Exactly.
And I think I also have this moment where I was thinking back to, okay, well, this comes full circle to what we talked about, which is why when you are proactive in your communication, it earns you a lot as well, because I think as working moms, inevitably we have interruptions. And again, like we said, we're going to do a whole episode on those interruptions and how to manage. But that is life. That's the big thing that changes pre-kids and post-kids.
Yeah.
You have interruptions. Someone gets sick. You have to leave early or whatever. If that's the only thing your manager sees when you are not working, when your work gets interrupted, and you're not constantly showing them the progress you are making, that's when it hurts your career. But I think it's also important for you to hold yourself accountable. Like you said, you do this sort of recap even for yourself to hold yourself accountable of like, what have I actually accomplished? I think that is important because there are women who have interruptions and then make it work and still get a lot accomplished. And I know as women, even though I was this morning doing I got 15,000 things accomplished 30 minutes earlier than when my husband's in charge of bringing my daughter to daycare. Okay. And I was just like, women are amazing. Okay. We are amazing. We are the best. We are the best workers.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that you are able to figure it out. So make sure you're showing it. But for that 1% of women who makes the rest of us look bad because all she is excuses and there is no work getting done, this holding yourself accountable, you can see on paper that you didn't do shit, right? And then know that. Okay.
And that is actually what I love about it most is I find for myself that going through the motion of doing it is I mean, literally to me, Teresa, what did I do today? And am I moving? And it becomes this real, I have definitely have Fridays where I've opened up that email and been like, shit, I did not do the XYZ things I need to do. But then I have this 30, 45 minute, hour, 2 hour, whatever block of amazing productivity.
But now you have the clarity. You have the clarity of what it is you need to do. And that's why these systems are so important.
So important. And it's like, and then it's also the feeling for myself of like, okay, I'm seeing myself move the ball further down the field, making progress towards the stuff that matters. And like, and but then before you know it, it's like, check. And I love
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
really a
don't we
fan
all
of
like
like
the
the little,
check, the cross out? It feels so good. But the receipts, to your point, the receipts are so important. The
yeah,
receipts work for you. We need receipts of what we've done. How many of us have ended the week and be like, what the F did I even do? Have
yeah,
I even done anything? But we know. We know you've done a lot, woman, right? But we have recency bias, which means that we only remember what happened in the last 5 minutes, especially with like so many things that we're carrying load. We can only remember the last 5 minutes.
yeah.
So you need a system where you're writing down for yourself what it is I've accomplished as you've done it, so that when you have that thought, what the F did I do? That there's a place you can go and be like, oh, I did all this stuff, right? If you can't do it, ask Claude to help, okay? It'll build it for you. But it's also a CYA, a cover your ass. Because Teresa, if your boss does dare to say, I don't know if you're ready for promotion, boom, bring out the receipts and show this is all the stuff that I've done. But guess what? You probably don't need to do that, because if your boss is seeing week after week after week all the things that you've done, you don't need to ask at end of year review, can I have a promotion? They've already put in the promotion 4 weeks
Totally.
earlier for you.
Totally. And by the way, I mean, like when this comes out, we're probably going to be right in the thrust of all of like the year-end review cycles for a lot of different firms. And like, and the other really valuable use case for this as an artifact is like as your own self-review. It's the content for like, what did you drive? And I think this is a really important, like, getting to read a lot of people's self-reviews and thinking about this always for myself. Like, this also shows up on resumes. This also shows up in your reviews. Like anytime you're talking about your performance, there is a tendency to talk about like the activity that you did, but not the
The
outcome.
results.
And yet this is your moment to talk about the outcomes. Like, what did you
Impact.
uniquely drive? What was the impact? What did you contribute to it? And like, and actually making sure that you're, even as you communicate in the day to day, like not getting too overwhelmed with process, but like, how are you impacting these initiatives? And
Especially if you're in the revenue generating role, when
totally.
you're asking for a
Oh my gosh.
$20,000 raise and you can show that you produced an extra $2 million in revenue for the company,
Yeah.
like they can go fuck off
That's
if they can't
huge.
find the $20,000 for you, right? It becomes
Yeah.
a much easier conversation.
And whatever the stats are of, it's like rolled out this new tool, it saved 25% of our time on XYZ. We're up to 50 something, whatever users. It resulted in X million dollars or whatever, $100,000 of revenue. Like those are all the things that ground the work that you're doing in how you are contributing to the actual tangible results of the business. And so making sure you always like incorporate that as a thread too. Like I have found wherever I've done that, it's like you get so much more credit for the work than like I had X number of meetings, I like pushed 5 pieces of paper, like it's just it's just so
But it
much
also
more real.
shows that you have the strategic thinking and the
Yeah.
understanding the higher level goals of the organization, which are the skills that you need if you want to move up. There's a difference between entry level executor work and managerial work and strategic, executive work. And that thinking is going to just help train you if you're trying to make that jump between executor and strategic individual. You need to train your brain to think in that way. So it's a great exercise to even start with. And then I'll also say the worst time to ask for a promotion is at performance review meeting. You can't get a promotion then. They've already decided who gets the promotion. So you want to start having that conversation in September if your end of year happens at end of, the actual annual year. If you are I don't understand these July, June, August fiscal year, but if you are one of those, do the math for yourself now. Okay. And this is where, but this is also where we can use bias to our advantage. So recency bias is a thing, which means let's just say your fiscal year goes from January to December. They're going to do performance reviews in December. Your manager doesn't remember shit about what you did from January through June. Okay. Nobody does. Okay. It's like, it's lost. So if what you did was really important, happened in that time period, you have to start almost like a campaign, like a political campaign. You have to start reseeding that and reminding people. I think like the Emmy Awards, like for your consideration, you need to create one of those posters basically for yourself, because nobody's remembering any of that. Don't rely on what you did in February to promote you in December. Or if you did do shit in the first 6 months of the year, okay, but you're going to do stuff now that's what they'll remember. This is when you
This is
use
also your
recency
moment.
bias to your advantage. So the reason we want to understand bias is because we can flip it on ourselves as well,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So
Well, I think
that's
we
the
got through
benefit.
half of your acronym so far. We got through D, discover,
Update.
you update.
The C is really clarify, which is, sometimes we get asked to do things and we're not quite sure what it is. Or the biggest one I love is the easiest thing to solve, which is nobody told you when it was due. And there's two types
Mm,
of people. A
yeah.
lot of women are people pleasers, and my people pleasers decide that everything that's given is urgent, even if it wasn't specified. And so they stop doing whatever else they're doing, work on this thing, hurry to get it done. And then that person doesn't respond for like 4 days, and you get quietly resentful, but also
Yeah.
it fucked you over for the important stuff. So always ask, when do you need this by? And that's also what you can use to negotiate if you got too much on your plate. But you need to clarify. If you don't have the information you need to move forward to really over deliver, you need to ask the questions. You won't look dumb for asking the clarifying question, but you will look dumb when you don't deliver and meet those
Yeah.
expectations.
I always find this to be such a funny one because I've seen this, I've really seen and felt this from both sides. Like I feel
Yes.
like one as a manager sometimes, like I'm conscious that oftentimes like I'll have more context on something as I'm giving somebody assignment than like they necessarily have, right? Like
Yes.
sometimes they're coming to something totally fresh. And so like there may be things that I neglect or forget to communicate like in that moment. They're actually really important to their understanding. And I found it super helpful to even just ask the question of like, do you want to repeat that back to me and just make sure like we're super clear on everything and like any other questions you have. And that having the person actually say it back in their own words tends to be really helpful for figuring out where there are any disconnects and making sure
Yes.
that I can clarify before any work happens and they start spinning their wheels, like what it looks like. The
And
other
you could
good way
do
I
that, but you
found,
could do the inverse when you're the direct report, which is saying, hold on, before we leave,
let me
I
repeat
just
that
want
back.
to repeat back what I'm taking from this to make sure I got everything. Do that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is like if you forget to or you don't for whatever, like you just need a minute to do that. The other way of handling it is like send the email follow up of like, hey, let me write down what I heard, what I understood. And then you can also fill in like, can you clarify this one point for me or when exactly you need this by or how I should handle this? But then you've at least got the documentation of like, okay, this is what I understand and what I'm going to go do. Sound good before you go spin your wheels. I hugely appreciate that as a manager and have found that to be very effective in like managing up.
And then the other thing I'll add is that I am the type as well. I'm not good on the spot sometimes with coming up with questions. I'm what I call a
Yeah.
marinator. I need to think about something. And for a lot of introverts, this is the way that your brain works as well. It takes a little bit of time that you're processing information and then you gather your thoughts. So if that is you and you've missed in the moment, what I like to do is I precede in that conversation. I go, okay, I took the notes. I'm going to think about this a little bit. Can I email you tomorrow with any additional questions that come up? So I'm already telling you that I'm going to do it so that you're not mistaking like I didn't listen or didn't take notes, which is what maybe someone would interpret, or maybe you're afraid they will. But I think it's really important to know that about yourself. If you're not one to think of questions in the moment or to realize you're missing information in the moment, say, can we schedule a follow up at the end of the week in case I have additional questions, or as I have time to look at this, I can come back with my plan and any questions where I need additional information.
Yeah, and I think I love that. I think that's an awesome suggestion. And I do think there's something really valuable about the like the in some ways, the longer you wait to respond, the more you create a hurdle for yourself of like
Yes.
what you feel like you're supposed to have gotten done before you can engage. And I think what's really nice about something like this also is that you actually like establish the rapport early and you get into that like, okay, I'm thinking about this, I'm structuring it, and or I'm asking a question. And it actually really takes down the psychological hurdle of like whatever I said needs to be complete baked before I can even have a conversation, which is very beneficial. It just prevents the like all kinds of work being done on something that then at the end of the day may actually be in a totally wrong direction relative to what the person was looking for.
100%. So, as we wrap up our conversation today and pulling back, when we think about this question of what gets in the way of smart women being promoted beyond the individual level, what comes to mind for you?
Okay, so I would say, I mean, I do think there's this big element of like how effectively you manage up, how you communicate your impact. The last thing that we didn't talk about that I think is actually really important is in this conversation is this concept of sponsorship, because I do
Yes.
actually think that this matters a ton to actually getting promoted. And partly it's your manager hopefully should be a good sponsor for you. And sponsorship, by the way, I think about a little bit different than mentorship. Mentorship, I would always say, is like the person you would go to for advice, counsel, perspective on certain topics
Someone
or
who's not
certain
going to
things.
judge you, but can give you that inside information. Yep.
Yeah, sometimes they just function as a good mirror or sounding board. A sponsor is kind of different than that. A sponsor is somebody who's basically always more senior, who's going to be in the room making decisions about who gets promoted, who gets paid what, and is really going to advocate for you.
Yeah, they're going
I
to
would argue.
mention your name in the room when you were not there. That's the difference.
Yeah, and there's a direct line that's important, because I do think typically it's like at the end of the day your manager or your manager's manager is going to have an enormous say in your own progression in a place. But also having sponsors like more broadly within an organization and other teams or just like in other parts of the organization is so helpful, because that's where like the other stuff comes up. I mean, there were so many examples of people getting roles in other units within firms I've been at because of great relationships and trust that they
That was
built.
my career.
Yeah, right? Like,
I was always promoted into different departments and team, and it's because I had
yeah,
sponsors at the SVP level to the
yeah,
VP level. My manager, yes, liked me and promoted me, but it was, I
but also,
literally had other SVPs and VPs say, hey, I have an open role on my team. You should apply.
yeah,
That's the difference, because it's
that's it.
really hard to move up solely in your team. This was a lesson that I learned. I think this is a big misconception. So if you're early in your career, you may have not realized this or been getting stuck here. I learned about promotions from watching television. And in television, someone comes home one day and was like, hey, I've been doing a good job, so I got promoted, right? Sort of like same job, you just get more money and a higher title. Well, I learned the hard way in the real world. That's not a lot of times how promotion works. A promotion is there's now an open role somewhere and you apply for that open role. That's a promotion, right? That a lot of times you're not just getting promoted on your same team and just moving up levels.
Yeah,
Unless you're like engineering, there's sort of a progression of that. You may not have to switch teams, but there's very much, does the business have a need for someone at that level? And sometimes when you want to get promoted, the team doesn't have a need or the budget to carry that higher title. And so it is very advantageous to you if you want to accelerate your career, not just to switch companies, but to switch teams, because there may be a higher title on a different team. And that's when, to your point, Teresa, sponsorship is even more important, because you need managers outside of your own manager, outside your department, to know about you, to say good things about you, and when there's an open role, to think about you.
yep, it's huge. Like, that's really, really, really huge. And like at a certain point too, making sure that you've got like a good, everybody always says obviously how important the network is and how important relationships are. But I do think this shows up in a really big way when you're thinking about like being ready for some type of move. I think what ultimately really ends up mattering a ton is at the end of the day, like you've got a real network of people around you, above you within an organization, around who are aware of, recognize, and like value your contribution. And I think like there's so many elements to that, right? It's like making sure you've done the good work, making sure they're aware of the work, maybe making sure that you've invested in them as a person, and like and find people you genuinely really connect with and can learn from. Those to me have easily been the most impactful relationships in my life. And it's funny because like sometimes those have turned into real opportunities, and sometimes those have just turned into really wonderful, deeply fulfilling relationships where I've learned a lot, I've grown a lot from like with respect to that person. And it's like it's really rewarding in its own way, even if it's not like
Yeah, you don't want to
tangibly
feel
rewarding.
alone in the workplace. We
Yeah.
all know that we like our jobs more. We like the people that we work with. We feel like we
Yeah.
have someone who's a confidant there. And I'm pretty sure there's studies to back that up. So it's not just bullshit at this point. But it brings up another thing. If I was going to close out this conversation, I would love to see more working moms reaching out and trying to support other working moms,
Yeah.
especially if you are already in that managerial position. If you see someone who's below you who's entering into this journey, think about how can you show up as that mentor or sponsor to them. How do we, the only way that we're going to be able to undo the gender bias is by having more women in power and positions, which challenges the bias.
Yeah.
And I think to do that, we need to be aware that bias exists. And just because you're a woman doesn't mean you don't have gender bias. Because we exist in this world and we read the reports and we see the limited women in the environments that we're in the upper levels, we are absorbing those biases just as much. So you need to recognize the bias and be intentional about overcoming that bias. So who's the working woman around you that you can spend a little bit more attention on, that you can support, that you can give advice to if you feel like there's more they could be doing? How do you support them so that we can continue to advance our careers? I think the whole point of this conversation is there's things that we can do as individuals, but we will not change the system one by one as individuals. We have to change in a systemic level as well. So we have to think about this as a group project. So
Yes.
do your share.
Group project. The other thing I'll say, mostly because I find that I often need to say this to myself. So this is me talking to myself and also all of you as I go here. But the other thing is, like, sometimes I feel like it's so easy to look at these problems that are like massive and societal, and it's just like how do we overcome this? But the answer is like one at a time. Like you holding somebody else's hand. And by the way, even if it's, even if it's somebody next to you, not necessarily below you, but like literally just like you've got two hands, reach them out and find
Ooh,
somebody to like lift up with you.
we got two hands. Yes.
If we all do that, even if some of us do that, like it will compound over time. And just so recognizing that like the little things matter. And sometimes
Yes.
it's even just one coffee, one 15-minute chat, just like a little bit goes such a long way. So, do
Yes, and
that
that's
on a
what we can
Friday.
do while we support the women and the men who are trying to change things at a systemic level. Like we still need affordable childcare. We still need school days that align with work days. And we'll talk more about that and we can bring in experts who can speak more to that. But today was really about, yeah, what are the small things that we can do that are in our control that will help us take more control over our careers and try and set us up, because we don't have to lose our ambition just because we're moms, but we do have to be
Totally.
really intentional.
Yes. And it's a great forcing function, right? Like don't get locked into the urgent, not important. It's always make sure you're thinking through like what really matters. That's
Yeah,
how we
we
get them.
know you are a really amazing woman. You can do a lot of hard things at the very same time. So it's using that superpower at your work in a way where it's impactful. So I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation today. I'm sure we'll come back to this conversation over and over. We'll put some of the links in the show notes for you. But if you thought this episode was impactful, please share it with a friend. Help spread the word. Be part of the community. You can sign up for our newsletter as well so that you can be the first to know about our episodes and be invited to special events that we start to do. But thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.